The resident dust alchemist and leader of Team Silver, Simin Megistus, who alludes to Hermes Trismegistus, known for being the author of the Hermetic writings that are very popular in the study of alchemy, but also being associated with the moon, and wisdom, and magic, a bunch of different things, as well as his name being the Greek translation for the Egyptian god Thoth, so there's a lot of things that go into this allusion for Simin Megistus. I'll leave a link in the description below to the RWBY Fanmade page that delves deeper into Simon's character allusions if you want to learn more about the character. I'll also leave a link to each of the silver trailers created by Mark Zhang, as they are absolutely incredible, and if you haven't seen them already, I highly recommend doing that, as we are going to be using them to analyze Simon's fighting capabilities in preparation for his participation in the Phoenix Festival tournament. Now, Simin is the only member of Team Silver to not have a semblance, currently, at least. There is always the possibility that he might awaken one in the future, but it honestly doesn't seem like he needs one to help him in combat, because he is a very capable and probably the most versatile member of Team Silver, thanks to the number of abilities that his weapon offers. He is capable of fighting hand-to-hand without any weapons, first and foremost, shown to incorporate a number of punches and kicks into his fighting style alongside the elemental weapons that his personal weapon is able to manifest. And his personal weapon is quite unique, being a synchronized dust projection jacket named Kore Kosmou. With 4 types of dust available to him, he is able to manifest various weapons seemingly associated, or at least synchronized, with the dust that is manifesting them out of. Each dust having certain weapons that it can manifest for different situations. The types of dust that he has available to him are ice, fire, wind, and earth, symbolized by the dust cartridges on the rotating disc on his back that have blue, red, green, and brown dust within it. Now, it is worth noting that green dust, in the RWBY series canon at least, used to be wind dust, but is now plant dust, as shown in the RWBY the Official Companion, and wind dust is now white. But regardless of the color, Simin, using the wind dust, definitely has some pretty intense capabilities when using it. Now, it seems when manifesting weapons using Kore Kosmou, different weapons require different amounts of dust based on the abilities that the weapon has itself. At least I'm left to presume by the number of times each weapon is manifest and the way that they're utilized within the silver trailers. And this kind of holds true in the RWBY series as well when we see Weiss using her dust in combat. Especially when she fought against Marrow in Volume 7, she used ice dust way more frequently than when she used other types of dust. In that fight, she only really used fire dust on top of that, but she only used it a bit sparingly, whereas ice dust she seemed to use very frequently. My guess is that manifesting icicles or ice weapons, in Simon's case, would require less dust physically than would requiring a fire weapon or something of the similar. At least I'm left to presume. Now, the weapons that Simin is able to manifest using the ice dust are what I would call light weapons. He's able to either manifest a one-handed short sword or a one-handed shield, and in any combination he wishes. We've seen him go sword and shield, or dual-wield swords and dual-wield shields. So whatever the situation calls for, he can use the ice dust for. And it seems like this is the one that he's most comfortable using right out of the gate, as both times when he enters combat in the Silver trailer and Regalia trailer, the first weapon that he chooses to manifest is the ice swords. And these ones are very good when fighting a lot of different opponents that are also using light weapons. But as we saw in the Silver trailer itself, when the White Fang Sergeant showed up with his heavy weapon, well, the light weapons themselves didn't hold up that well when it came to trying to block heavy attacks. The Sergeant used his drill to pierce through the shield that Simin had, and also when trying to block a heavy attack from the White Fang Sergeant using the sword, it snapped in half after a single hit. After that point, though, Simin switched gears and switched to his heavy weapon, which is manifested from fire dust, a fire greatsword that we've seen him wield both single-handedly and two-handedly. Now, this sword itself has fire capabilities with it just from swinging it, where it seems the ice weapons that were manifested don't necessarily have ice capabilities or freezing capabilities when making contact with opponents, whereas the fire dust definitely does, especially if he puts his aura into it and throws the sword outwards, or puts it into an opponent and kicks them backwards. The fire sword will explode, causing area of effect damage. So this sword is definitely more of a heavy weapon, and in the Regalia trailer, at least as far as I was able to tell, the sword was the one cutting the mechanical knights into pieces or in half, whereas the light weapons, the one-handed swords from the ice dust, weren't really actually cutting into the opponents. There was the occasional time where it stabbed into the knights, but it was only the fire sword that was cutting through them. So it's more of a heavy-hitting weapon, whereas the ice swords are more light weapons. Then we get to wind dust. This is the third and final dust that we've seen Simon use in the Silver trailers. We haven't seen him use earth dust yet, but I have an idea as to why that may be. But first, the wind dust seems to be what Simon uses as more of a finisher. He's only used it at the end of the Silver trailer, but when he manifests the wind lance and throws it, it creates a giant wind dust tornado, which would seem to require, first and foremost, a lot of wind dust to be able to do, so maybe that's why he uses it more sparingly, and also it seems as more of a finisher because it's more of a wide range area of effect kind of attack. We haven't seen him use this physically, as the fire dust is able to be compacted into a great sword, able to deal physical damage. The wind lance that was manifested is still swirling, so I don't know if it has physical shape or if it's more just for dealing those wind style of attacks. Now, the final type of dust in Kore Kosmou is earth dust, and as I said, we haven't seen this one used. And the reason for this is probably because whenever that weapon is used, it causes damage to the terrain around him. And when he's fighting, you know, alongside the rest of his team or in an enclosed warehouse, this might not be the best way of doing things, because often, at least in other shows, other anime, etc., when earth abilities are used, it's often a weapon is slammed into the ground and spires come flying out of the ground to deal damage to opponents. So that is kind of what I would think that the earth weapon would be capable of, utilizing earth dust, especially based on what Weiss did in the finale, or near the end of Volume 6, when she used the earth dust to conjure a giant spire of earth to block the blasts coming from Cordovan's mecha. So that's what I'm guessing the earth dust is capable of, but now that we've gone over each type of dust individually, now we get into even more versatility of Kore Kosmou, because with Kore Kosmou, Simon is able to use different types of dust at the same time. We've seen Simon dual wield with one of the ice swords and the fire greatsword in the other hand, able to use both fire and ice at the same time, allowing just that much more versatility. Not to mention, even when he has the ice dust swords manifested, he can charge them with fire dust and create his own version of freezer burn, creating a cloak of steam, as steam dust itself is created using water and fire, but by adding fire to ice dust, you essentially get the same effect, as we saw back in Volume 2, as we saw in Volume 7, and see here in the Silver trailer. So Simon has a lot of versatility when it comes to his weapons, and a lot of versatility that we just haven't seen yet. If, for example, he adds wind dust and adds fire dust to that, he could create essentially a cyclone of fire, which would be an incredibly devastating attack. But when we saw him use the wind cyclone in the Silver trailer, he was fighting against White Fang grunts, and I'm guessing he probably didn't want to kill all of them, or at least leave them horribly scarred with burns, so it makes sense as to why he didn't do that. Similarly, if he had the wind lance and charged it with ice dust, he could probably create something akin to a blizzard. Now, when it comes to earth dust and combining it with other types of dust, of course, you could combine the earth dust with wind dust to make sort of a sandstorm or cyclone style of an effect, but if you combine it with the fire dust, for example, would you get something akin to lava, like turning the ground into lava? If earth dust is meant to, you know, create the spires from the ground, could you create like a pool of lava or something like that? Depending on the amount of dust that Kore Kosmou allows Simon to use, and the area of effect that this would be capable of, this weapon is very, very versatile. But, as I said, the amount of dust that is used matters. So if Simon is planning on being in a prolonged battle, then he has to be wary of when he uses the dust, how much he uses, what weapons he manifests when, and what would be most ideal in different situations. as if he uses, for example, the Wind Lance. If the amount of dust that he has in Kore Kosmou is good for maybe 2 or 3 lances, and that's it, whereas the Ice Dust could manifest, a dozen swords or shields however he needs, then he would have to choose where to use those Wind Lances, what would be the ideal opportunities, a lot more carefully than manifesting the ice weapons, and what would be better for blocking, etc. So even though Kore Kosmou is a very versatile weapon, with the number of abilities that it gives the user access to, it is not without its weaknesses. The amount of dust that is used by each weapon is something that needs to be considered every time a weapon is manifested, not to mention the strengths and weaknesses of each weapon. So it's largely up to the skills of the user to be able to read the battlefield and retain the knowledge of how much dust has already been used, how much is left for each element, etc. So Simin is very skilled in his own right, being able to utilize Kore Kosmou as well as he can. And honestly, I really look forward to seeing anything more of Team Silver that Mark Zhang is able to put out. And I really look forward to analyzing the rest of the members of Team Silver. So make sure to let me know your thoughts down in the comments below. How did I do analyzing Simin Megistus? Do you think that there's anything that I missed, or do you think I covered everything pretty well? Do you have any idea what weapon the Earth Dust might actually manifest? I always see Earth weapons that can cause the Earth spires to rise from the ground as more axes, or things that can slam into the ground really easily, but also Rigora, the final member of Team Silver, has an axe-style weapon already, so maybe it's not an axe. What ideas do you guys have? Do you have any other ideas for dust combinations that could be possible utilizing Kore Kosmou? I'd really be interested to know your thoughts, so make sure to let me know. And if you did enjoy this video, want to see more content like that, the Phoenix Festival tournament itself, etc., make sure to subscribe, join the Guild of the Eternal Flame, join our Discord server as well, link also in the description below, tweet me at PhoenixKnight7, and I'll see you guys in the next video.